and constantly go on about, and rightly, they seem to miss out on underlining and underscoring the severe ramifications which arise from it, so that instead of addressing those catalysts and making that the main focus, they go on to false solutions, such as don't consent, which is a big abstraction that David Icke has recently proposed. Don't consent to corruption and what it demands of us explicitly and implicitly. Well, that's great. How do we go about doing that when we haven't properly identified what the methodologies and the technological ramifications which make it so severely influential in the first place, so that people are in a basically zombie-like state, which he keeps decrying, or such that human character is pervasively corroded to the point that the average person now is a fifth columnist, and it's that simple. He doesn't go into spelling out those details, because all he wants to talk about is feel-good notions of the same old New Age dogma of creating our own reality and focusing on changing the frequency of our own psychological state, as if that magically changed the environment and other people, which is absurd. And Alex Jones is focused on humanist principles of dignity and honor, and encapsulates a certain mythos of Americana into as being premier demonstrations of those qualities of human merit and the worthwhile forms of human existence which are possible to man, supposedly, and which were typified in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and in our revolution in the United States of America in recent centuries. Well, without over-idealizing it, I don't disagree with him, and at the same time not acquiescing to the coercive influences of corrupt power, as David Icke recommends to reduce it to a simple form, what he says in his most recent video on that. The Solution is called. I also agree with that wholeheartedly, but their lack of focus on the problems and the obstacles which get in the way of what they recommend is stark when looking at their content. They're focused on the exoteric manifestations of political and social and economic action. It's as if they're avoiding, like the plague, discussion of things which might label them conspiracy theoretical, when those are the very issues which force the matter, so that we find ourselves in the absurd condition we're in, and hence their hysterics or their dedicated efforts and their zeal in various proportions to addressing these problems. And yet it comes to their awareness that there are such things as covert internet topologies, for example, with Alex Jones, and the need to fight that and find some way to assure the quality of communication on the internet for your platform was brought up, and also in analogous ways the issue of voter fraud and the need to get quality assurance as to that process seen as critical. Yes, it is critical. What else is critical is acknowledging the covert fifth column and its actual size and its various aspects or features, which are not well covered except speciously. David Icke focuses on the idea of a reptilian bloodline elite and all of its extensions and instruments, and Alex Jones focuses on a kind of different interpretation of the same indicated corrupt elite, with a focus on its action in certain conventional forms, such as in the coercion. As he'll typify a fifth column as being of this or that agenda, and hence a subset of the type of fifth column I'm talking about. But neither of these, and David Icke will discuss the psychotronics control grid and the counterfeiting racketeering process, the Federal Reserve Bank, And so will Alex Jones. They'll go into it, but they don't underscore it enough, and they focus on the conventional rhetoric about these matters or discussion about these matters, and perhaps for rhetorical reasons, because that's the best way to keep your audience who are, if what I say is true, and if what they seem to know is true, then they would be somehow programmed to be averse to those topics, and he might lose a lot of his audience, might lose a lot of his influence. And I believe that they're working on a sort of stair-step introduction, but I would say that it doesn't come fast enough or effectively enough, because they're far behind the curve. They're exponentially behind the curve in terms of how this system will react to them and absorb their influence in various ways, such as covert internet topologies demonstrated the capability of doing, although he seems to have developed countermeasures against that Alex Jones has. I have not. I have 700 plus subscribers and an average of 40 to 100 views per each of my videos, which is ridiculous. The exposure is clearly being truncated covertly, clearly being censored covertly on the internet by YouTube and Google and so on. It's not just Alex Jones that takes the flak. It's anybody else that exposes the truth about corruption and power. But the fifth column aren't just the Trendinistas. They aren't just communists and socialists. Those might be a common feature of them, but it's anyone that can be influenced by a bribe or a threat by an intelligence apparatus, directly or indirectly, which is, given the character of people, 80% of the population minimum. And that's getting worse with each generation, especially due to the fact that they're being born into and developing in these worsening conditions. You just look at the onslaught of vaccinations, which are being introduced, and other forms of weaponized medicine, and basically chemical warfare, which are being introduced into the urban and various populations, and their effects on the infants and the development of children, and therefore the way that is working synergistically with the weaponized propaganda platforms and the coercive power of the counterfeit racketeering. Psychotronics control grid is getting constantly intensified and newly improved on a regular basis, and the developments in computing, especially quantum computing arrays, is well ahead of anything reported, which is already phenomenal. Just look, hashtag Vesuvius and supercomputing and quantum computing. They're going to integrate the fusion centers and many other processes into that one computing array, and it's going to get exponentially worse than it is even now. What's going to happen is, I could just make a quick prediction, the majority of the fifth column apparatus is going to be dissolved because they're already operating on a clockwork basis, especially through psychotronics. I mean, basic functions of the nervous system can be attenuated, or they can be diminished, or made myopic, or exaggerated with psychotronics, with Lily waves, Wi-Fi, and the various types of standing waves of scalar interferometry, so that basically autonomic functions of the body can be repurposed to serve a psychological warfare agenda. And the details of how that works, and how that works hand in hand with covert fifth columnry, is something I'll get into in more detail in this video.